National Scrapbook Day, everybody. It is May 2nd. It is the first Saturday of May, which is when National Scrapbook Day is. Thank you so much for joining me for a show today. We are going to be learning today. We are going to be doing both we're going to be doing a project, but we're also going to be learning a technique. I'm going to be teaching, and you are probably going to want to take notes today because I'm going to be giving measurements for this project. So you can, if you want to make it exactly the way that I'm going to be making it today, and you don't want to learn the technique for converting and do all the conversion yourself, you might want to write it down. All right, so what we're going to be working on today is what I'm calling the Project X Folio, and it is an adaptation of a page from the Half the Fun tutorial, this one, that has this X shape on it, okay, this X design. And what we're going to be learning today is, what if I have a page, like an interactive page from a book that I really like, I want to make it bigger, and I want to make it into like a folio or a photo wallet or something like that. So I'm going to teach you how to majorly upsize things so that you can then go through, and any page style from any album that you have a tutorial for or a guide for, you can increase the size of it and make it a standalone project. We talked a little bit about this when we did the Split Decision album, because Split Decision is 10 by 10 pages, and those pages are so intricate that you don't even have to upsize them or change them really or anything to make them standalone folios. You just have to stick them in a roll of KRAFT-TEX and you're done. But this one is small. It's 5 by 10. So, you know, what would we do? And there's two ways to go about this. And one way is the way that is described in the Half the Fun Album Basics Guide, which is a mathematical way to do it, where you are increasing the size of it and you're keeping the proportions the same. And so you're making a literal upscale of it. That way doesn't require you to make any decisions, but it does require you to do a lot of math. So what I'm going to teach you today is a different path, which is let's keep the vibes and not worry about the dimensions. Okay, let's keep the vibes. So that's what we're going to do today. So when we think about this page, what's the number one thing that we have to keep the vibes? We have to have that X. Okay, so when we're thinking about the elements that we want, okay, we need that X design, X pocket. And then we have the shape of it, which is, you know, it's in thirds like this with the X in the middle. All right. And then we can do anything we want here and anything we want here, because in the original, you know, that's just a closure that has a photo mat on it, right? So it doesn't matter what's there. So now all we have to decide is, how exactly are we going to lay this out? And what dimensions are we going to use? And again, we can use whatever we want. So what I'm proposing is we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.5. We make it 8.5 by 11. Okay. All right. So this is, let's see, 3, 6, 9. Yeah, this is 8.5 by 11, the size of this square. So on this, up here at the top, we have this pocket that goes all the way down. Let's draw that here. So we have an inch at the top, and we know that this is a pocket we can stick stuff in. All right, then we have the X. And on this, it looks like we have about a 2-inch drop from the top of the X to the bottom of the X. And then here, so this point is both an inch below this, inch below the top and an inch above the bottom. So we can make the X as extreme as we want. We just have to kind of keep that in mind. So what if we do 3? Okay. So if we do 3, again, you can do anything you want. All right, so there's our X, which means that this is also a pocket here. This is a pocket here. This is a pocket here. Then we could, let's add another pocket here. Why not? And this is a 4, this is 4 inches. Well, it's 3.5. Okay. So then this would be the new design. So now that I have it laid out here, I just have to figure out how do I do these measurements? What are the new measurements? Okay. So now this is for cardstock. Okay. Everyone with me so far? Oh, I'm writing on 2 different pages. This is great. All right, cool. At some point I must have cut this and not noticed. All right. So we need one piece that is 11 inches by 8.5. And this is going to be the base to which we attach everything. All right. And then we need another piece that is 13 inches by 8.5. Okay. And this is where we have to start thinking through that. The piece that's 13 inches by 8.5, don't worry, obviously 13 inches is a made up measurement. We'll deal with that later. Probably by making one that's 11 by 8.5 plus 2 that are 2 inches by 8.5. Not 8.5, 7.5. So we'll break it up later. That's this pocket here. So it's 2 inches wider because we have to have flaps that fold around. But it's not 1 inch longer because even though we need a flap for the bottom, we want it to drop down an inch. Yes? So that's why it's the same size. It's the same length. Okay? All right. So that's easy. All right. That's this pocket here. Okay? So the piece I'm talking about, let's call this first piece A right here. That's the base. Now the one I just talked about is this one here. That's B. That's the second one. Okay. So we're going to come down here. We'll call this next one C. That's this one. This top piece here. Okay. What we know about C is that even though it doesn't look like it's the same size as B, it is. Okay. So C is also 13 by 8.5. And the reason why is because we're going to remove a piece of it. Okay, yeah. And then we have, so that's C. And this is also C over here. It's one piece, goes all the way across. All right, D. All right, so this one here, this is this one D. D is this tall. I'm going to draw a dashed line so you can visualize. The reason why I'm going through all this is because I want you to know that you can apply this to any page in any tutorial you have to make yourself a quick and easy folio. Okay? So that way if you just need something to hold a few photos or for a quick gift or whatever, you know, this is how you do the conversion. So I'm trying to teach you a theory or a concept or a technique. Okay, rather than, I could have just made this and then just told you the dimensions, but I want to walk through it with you, okay, because I want you to kind of understand. So we know that this drop here is 1.5 inches, and the reason we know that is because I dropped this over here 3 inches, and we know that this is half of that. So D is 1.5 inches shorter than C. So it's still 13, but instead of being 8.5, it's 7. Okay? It's instead of being 8.5, it's 7. All right? Are you with me so far? And that leaves us one piece, and that's E. Down here, E. Okay. So E is 3.5. plus 1 inch for the hinge, so it's 4.5, and it's 13 because it's 2 inches wider. Okay, now obviously this 13, like I said, that's probably, we're going to transform that into hinges, because we're not, you know, otherwise we'd have to make 13-inch cardstock, and that's just, you know, who needs that? Who needs that? So we're not going to do that. All right, so I'm now going to write what the actual cut list is for each of these pieces. So I'm going to write it on the piece. So A is easy. It's 1 at 11 inches by 8.5. If you have questions, please ask them. Don't worry about it. B is 1 at 11 by 8.5. And 2 that are 2 by 7.5. Okay, those 2 by 7.5, that's the hinges that go on either side, because we're not actually making 13-inch cardstock. And the reason it's 7.5 is the side hinges are an inch shorter, because you don't have to put the bottom half on there, or the bottom hinge. Okay, so that it's the side hinges are an inch shorter to accommodate that lack of a bottom hinge. Okay, so C is, we start with the 11 by 8.5 that will then cut down, and just like the other one, it has 2 by 7.5. Okay, because like I said, C and B are the same. C and B are the same. D is the one that's shorter. So we need 1 at where's D? 1 that is 11 by 7, and 2 at that are 2 by 6. And then E, we need 1 that's 11 by 4.5, and 2 that are 2 by 3.5 for the hinges. Okay, so that's all the pieces that are going to make this. All right, so what I will do is I will hold this up so that you can take a screenshot or whatever if you don't want to write it all down. Okay? Okay. All right. So this is the main piece. All right. So now we have to figure out this part. So we got the X pocket. We did this, so we can cross it out. Now we have to figure out, this is the KRAFT-TEX, right? Or if you don't use KRAFT-TEX, this is the Tyvek. Okay. So that's this piece. So we're going to have our folio, and it's going to have, this is not to scale, by the way. This piece right here has to hold something that's 8.5 by 11, because we're going to glue this into it. So I'm going to make it 1/2 inch bigger a 1/4 inch bigger all the way around, which means that instead of being 8.5 by 11, it is going to make it, or it's going to be 9. Okay, so our KRAFT-TEX is going to be 9, and it's going to be, I'm going to say 12 by 9. I'm going to give myself an inch on the top and bottom because we need the KRAFT-TEX to roll over. So I'm going to say that's 12 by 9, this middle piece. And then for these two pieces, I want this top one to come down, be an inch short of the bottom. So, wait, this is wrong. Sorry. It's 11.5 by 9.5. Ta-da. Okay. So up here it's 11.5 because obviously the whole thing is going to be the same size, but I want it to be short an inch, so I'm going to make it 11.5 by 8.5. And this one down here, I'm going to make short 2 inches, so 7.5. So to find out how big my whole piece of KRAFT-TEX needs to be, I'm going to add up the 8.5, the 9.5, and the 7.5. Which is 8.5 plus 9.5 is 18, and plus 7.5 is 16 and 15, 25.5. Why am I doing this math in my head? That sounds like we're asking for trouble. Let's get out. 8.5 plus 9.5. I like how basic math stymied me. 7.5. 25.5. I was right. So the KRAFT-TEX piece is one piece at 11.5 by 25.5. All right. So then we just will have to design, and we'll probably do this later on. What are we going to do on here and here? Okay, on the 2 flaps. Like, are we going to add designs there? What are we going to do? But we'll do that after we've got the main piece in there, so you can see how it came together. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. Just type it in the chat right now. I'm going to go get my KRAFT-TEX and show you how I cut a big piece of KRAFT-TEX like that. All right, I'm going to move this for just a second. Like I said, I need a piece that's 11.5 by 25.5. Now, KRAFT-TEX is, I think, 19 inches. So it's not long enough for me to cut it this way. So I'm going to have to cut it. Why isn't E an inch below D? Because D, all right, you can't look at the side here because D has to come to a point here. So you see, it's much farther below D than the sides would have you think. So the question is, why is the measurement for E so much smaller than the measurement for D when it looks like it's an inch shorter? It's because it's not an inch shorter, because D comes all the way up to here, to this dashed line. So this dashed line represents the real size of D if D were a rectangle. So D's an inch shorter than C, but E is not an inch shorter than D. Okay, so when I'm dealing with a big piece of KRAFT-TEX like this, and I know I have to get something that's 25 inches at the end, what I do is I'm going to find okay. So I'm going to get my big ruler. And this ruler is 18 and a half. You can do this with any size. So now Candy's fighting with me about how I'm wrong. So what you think is that E should be only 1 inch smaller than D. That's what you think? But D is at least 1.5 inches, if not, it's 2.5 inches taller, because this is D. This dashed line is D. All right, that's why. All right, so this ruler is 18.5. You can use this technique with any size ruler. You just have to do your math. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut a slit in the side of my KRAFT-TEX at 18.5 inches. E is also a pocket, they're all pockets. Okay, so I have this slit that I've cut in the side of my KRAFT-TEX. I know that this is 18.5 inches. So now I can move this down, and I have to, I'm gonna put this, so now I have to figure out what is, if it's 25.5 and this is 18.5, at what measurement do I need to put on it? So do I line it up with 7? Do I line it up with whatever? And I know I have to line it up with 7 and something. I don't want to, I want to have some wiggle room, so I'm going to line it up with 8. I like to give myself some extra space. And the reason I like to give myself some extra space on the ends is because if I mess it up, you know, I can trim it and fix it. All right, so now all I have to do is cut straight up from here. And that gives me a square that's easier to manage than this bolt of KRAFT-TEX. All right, so now we're done with the bolt. We don't have to work with the bolt anymore. So yay! Okay. Now, I have to cut it 2 different ways. I have to get it so that it's actually 25.5. And I have to get it so it's an 11, so it's 11.5, okay? So I need to get it from here to here, 25.5, and from here to here, 11.5. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fold this into thirds. And I'm gonna fold it like as close into thirds as I can. Because that'll allow me KRAFT-TEX is paper that is treated and loomed to be a product that is more like cloth. So like you can wash it. It's more like a fabric. Okay, so now that I've got it down to this, I can put it in my trimmer and I can trim it down to 11.5. Okay, or I can just use, you know, a ruler and a rotary trimmer. So for example, I can take this edge and I'm going to put this edge at the 9-inch mark because I want to give myself a little, I want to trim both ends. Okay, put that at the 9-inch mark. I've got the edge straight. And then I'm going to cut it at 21.5. And that's going to make it the right size. That'll make it okay. All right, so now I know that this edge is straight. Now I can put this edge on the 10 and cut it at 21.5, and then it'll be the right size, the size that I need. Okay. And by folding it up, it just makes it okay. All right, now it's the right height, or in this case it'll be width because we're going to put everything in it like this. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do now is the ends are ragged, and that's fine. So I'm going to put the end so that it hangs over the 10. So you see this is the 10. And I've got the raggedy edge hanging over the 10, but I'm not putting it at 9. I'm just putting it so that this crooked edge is hanging over 10. Then I'm going to take my piece and I'm going to drag it across. And what did I say? This top panel is 8.5. So this is at 10. I'm going to take this to 8.5. Going to put 8.5. I'm gonna now score it so that I know that this is 8.5. All right, so I've got that. You can see here I've got a score line. Now I can do a couple things. One, I can put this score line on the 10, and that will enable me to cut my edge straight. So I'm going to cut at 8.5. And then I'll know that this top is straight and it's 8.5. Okay. Candy, are you totally confused as in you need it walked through again? Or are you explaining the way in which you were confused? Okay, so now I'm going to put that score line at 10. All right. Because I know that I need to go 9.5 down. Okay, no, Candy is no longer confused. Okay. All right, so we're going to come down 9.5 from this. All right, because I said that middle piece is going to be 9.5. So I've got my other score line at 10. So now I'm going to go down to 19.5 and make another score line. Okay, so I know this middle panel is the right size now. So now all I have to do is take this panel here, this last one, put the score line at 10. And my bottom panel needs to be a total of 7.5. So I'm going to put this at 17.5. Because I'm starting at 10. So, and this is where I cut. All right. So now it's all the right size. So now on those score lines, I'm going to fold and score and burnish. Okay, so this is the bottom flap. And then I'm going to score, fold and score on this one. And that's going to make the top flap. And you can see how this bottom flap is 2 inches short of that. So that works. And when I fold this down, it should be 1 inch short of the bottom, which it is. Yes, KRAFT-TEX comes in a number of colors. And a variety of finishes as well. It's spelled with a K, KRAFT-TEX. Okay, So now I've got the general shape. I have a curve here because I have a KRAFT-TEX by the bolt. So that's where it was wrapped around the bolt. So all I'm gonna do is just roll it the opposite direction to kind of help get rid of that curve. Okay, all right. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock and I'm gonna glue it to my KRAFT-TEX. The reason I'm gonna do that is because then I can set my KRAFT-TEX to the side and let it start flattening out. And that gives me a piece of cardstock to stick everything else to. So I only have to glue this one piece. I don't have to glue everything. Everything else I can just use tape because it's getting stuck to a piece of cardstock. So that way we're not going to deal. If you don't have one big intact piece of KRAFT-TEX, yes, you could make KRAFT-TEX hinges instead. Yes, you could do that. All right, so I'm gonna glue this down. And I'm gonna use, you can also use Tyvek. See how I have another hump here from the bolt? Again, I'm just gonna bend it in the opposite direction. Try and get it to lay a little flatter. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stick this down and I'm going to use a ruler to line it up a 1/2 inch over this score line. This score line that I made is going to fall kind of in between, so I'm going to make a couple other scores. We're probably going to do that where we do a lot of scoring to make it roll. All right, so now I'm going to put glue down. This glue that I'm using is called Perfect Paper Adhesive. It's from a company called US Art Quest. It works very well with a number of materials. It gives you a lot of time to work because it doesn't dry quickly. I have tested Scotch Quick Dry on KRAFT-TEX. It also works fine, so you do not need this glue if you don't have it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this down on the KRAFT-TEX and I'm going to kind of wiggle it around. You can see I've got a lot of glue oozing out the sides. That's fine. That's totally fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm just wiggling it until it's centered as best as I can tell. And it's starting to grab to the KRAFT-TEX. And then once it starts to grab to the KRAFT-TEX, I'm going to get a baby wipe and I'm going to start pushing the glue to the edge. So I'm going to start in the middle and push the glue to the edge. And that's what I'm doing. I'm pushing the glue from the middle to the edge to ensure that I have good contact all the way. All right. And then you can see how, maybe you can, maybe you can't. It's lifting a little bit on this edge down here. Any edge where it's kind of lifting like that, I'll just hold it for a little bit of time until it kind of stops coming back up again when I move my fingers. And all of this glue oozing, you don't have to worry about with this particular glue. This particular glue dries matte. So it's Perfect Paper Adhesive Matte by US Art Quest. I believe you can get it at like Dick Blick, Artorama, places like that. But yeah, you absolutely can just use hinges. In my my first folios, I just used hinges. I just used cardstock for the pieces and I used KRAFT-TEX to make hinges in between them so they'd be more sturdy. And if you do that, then you can run your KRAFT-TEX through your embossing folders and give it a design. Okay, so I've got this, you know, working. This is where we're going to attach our main page element. But I am going to I should put one on the top and one on the bottom as well. So what are these? 11.5 or 11 by 7.5 on the top and 11 by 6.5 on the bottom. All right, so here I've got 11 by 7.5. That's going to go up here. I'm going to stick it about 1/2 inch down from the top. I'm going to eyeball it, but you can use a ruler. You want to put a generous amount of glue on here, because the way that this glue works is it forms a solid sheet of adhesive between two pieces of paper, and it blends them into one piece of paper. So you want glue, you know, really going all the way around. So again, I'm gonna just wiggle it around. I'm moving it side to side. Not a lot, you know, because you want it to stay in the same general area. And then once I feel it start to grab and it gets hard to move, that's when I'm going to grab my baby wipe and I'm going to start pushing the glue to the edges. And we have a digital sale today. It's 50. Ooh, this is crooked. Oh, darn it. Oh, well, whatever. Let it go. Just gonna let it go. Okay. I'll put paper on top of it, so the fact that it's slightly crooked is not going to be obvious in the finished one. Coupon code is NSD2020, National Scrapbook Day 2020. NSD2020, and it will apply only to digital items, so you can put whatever you want in your cart. Your cart can be a mix of digital and physical items, and it will still work. All right, and so then this bottom one will be 6.5 by 11, and we'll stick it down right here. And again, I'm sticking it down about 1/2 inch from the top. And this cardstock is just to give me stuff to glue paper to stick paper to. Sticking paper to KRAFT-TEX is kind of a pain, as you can see, and I don't want to be doing this with hinges, you know, and sitting there and waiting for a hinge to dry. So you can work with KRAFT-TEX a lot more quickly if you put these kind of like primer pieces down. So when we say digital, basically it's anything that would not be shipped to you. So that would be album basics, guides, workshops, tutorials, manuals, videos, all that kind of stuff. Anything where you'd be getting a link to download or to join box. 8.5, then 9.5 over from that, then 7.5 over from that are the score measurements. So 8.5, then 9.5 inches, 8.5, 9.5 over. All right. Are what the scores are. Yeah, see, this edge wants to lift over here. Sometimes that happens. I don't know. I wish I knew why sometimes it's curlier than other times, because then I could adjust what I'm doing. But see, like this one's really curly. Probably just wants to be a punk. All right, when the whole thing is lifting like this, sometimes the easiest thing to do is to flip it over so you can press from the back. With something heavy. So let's see, I'm going to use this box. I'm going to put this box on it, and I'm going to just lean on the box. I like to put the smoother side on the outside, but you can stick glue to either side. But I like the smoother side on the outside because it looks more finished. So I'm just gonna press, like I'm just leaning my torso on this box. And I'm gonna pick it up and flip it over and see how it's doing. It's doing okay. Just gonna clean up the glue a little bit. Okay, now that I've done that, what am I going to do with this KRAFT-TEX? I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it somewhere to get squished. So what I'm doing is, and I'm in another part of my room and I'm off camera so you can't see me, but I'm going to walk you through what I'm doing. I'm putting it face down on top of a bookshelf, and then I'm taking all my boxes of 13 by 19 paper and I'm putting them on top of it so it gets squished. And it's just going to sit there while we work on the insert. Oh my gosh, I have so much paper. So much paper. And then because my 13 by 19 boxes aren't quite enough to go all the way across, I'm going to use that same box that I was pressing down on, and I'm going to put a box of dies on top of it for the edge that's not quite covered. So let's see. I think we're in good shape. So I'm going to, so that's the KRAFT-TEX exterior. That's where we're going to start in terms of you have that problem of too much paper. Oh, I can't believe another crafter has a too much paper problem. We're always so good about not collecting too much paper to use. Yeah, if you don't have, Bev says if you don't have all that, then leave it, just lay it on the floor and then lay on top of it. Who else has maybe collected more paper than they probably need? Let's see a show of hands. Barbara Jean's already like, is there really such a thing as too much paper? Well, if we agree that there's no such thing as too much paper, then none of us, yes, we can do the inserts you can do the inserts if you're behind on the KRAFT-TEX. Because the inserts, I'm going to do them as totally separate things and then stick them to the KRAFT-TEX. I don't have too much as long as I live to be 150. Well, Mr. Lifeguard says, it seems like that extra paper came in handy just now. So it's not even extra paper. Yeah, no, that's a good point that he's making. What would I have used to press out a 25-inch piece of KRAFT-TEX if I hadn't had all of that paper? Okay. All right. So let's recap where we are. So where we are is with this. I have made this. So this is the KRAFT-TEX piece. The KRAFT-TEX piece is 11.5 by 25.5, and I have divided it into an 8.5-inch section, a 9.5-inch section, and a 7.5-inch section. To the 11.5-inch by 8.5-inch section, I have glued an 11-inch by 7.5-inch piece of cardstock. To the 11.5-inch by 9.5-inch section, I've glued an 11-inch by 8.5-inch piece of cardstock. And to the 11.5-inch by 7.5-inch section, I've glued an 11 by 6.5-inch piece of cardstock. That is now drying under a stack of paper so that it'll be nice and flat. It won't be curly or weird or anything like that. And that is just going to sit there and dry while we work on this main insert, which is the adapted version of the Project X. And we do not need that. We do not need that in order for this to work, because what we can do is we can build it off of B. And then because what we glued into the book is A. Okay, so this is 11 by 8.5. This is basically what we glued into this center section of the book to be our base. So what we'll do is we'll build everything on top of B, and we'll just leave the tape on B's flaps, and then we can stick the whole stack onto A at the end. Okay, so Kimberly asked, if I'm not done with the KRAFT-TEX part, like while crafting along with you, can I set it aside and work on the insert? Absolutely. You can do the KRAFT-TEX whenever. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a recording break here. I'm going to announce a bunch of prize winners for the National Scrapbook Day prizes, and then I'll start a new recording with working on the insert so that the insert's on its own recording. So part one of this series will be what we just did, which is how to upsize something, how to you know, take something that's a page that you like and turn it into a folio, and creating the KRAFT-TEX exterior. And then the next part will be the insert. So in the next part on the recording, you will see the insert, and I'll put all the prizes into like their own folder in the archives, and then we just won't worry about having the prizes up on YouTube because we don't need that. That's boring. All right, so I will thank you so much for watching this so far. Happy National Scrapbook Day. I hope that this was helpful and that you'll be able to use it in the future to adapt some of your favorite album page styles to make cool little folios or whatever. And in the next video, I'll be back with the insert. So stay tuned for that.